of all, I think your analysis was very straight line. History doesn't run in a straight line.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing funds.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go along that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they weren't talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD.
I got that thing.
No, calm down.
I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou Taylor. That's good. I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective,
Yes,
but
the
an
Chinese critic.
erratic
Mikhail
detective,
Rodriguez.
Mikhail Rodriguez.
Why an African slap an Indian? Why a man and slap a woman? Look, Gildarie, you deal with that. You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
Gildarie, you apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that. Hi there, this is the Freddie Kissoon show with co-host Leonard Gildarie and Akash Prasad. Welcome to Akash. Akash has been with us for a few sessions now and he has done well. So Guyana has another accomplished journalist. This evening we have one of the most pleasant politicians you can find anywhere around. He was here a year ago, and I can't remember if I made some remarks which were personal to me, and I would like, if I can't remember if I made those remarks, if I did, I'd like to repeat them. And if I did not make those remarks, I think viewers should hear, because it gives you an insight into the political character. Well, not political, I withdraw that word. The totality of the character of a person, their persona. So I'll introduce our guest who appeared here a year ago, and it's always pleasant to talk to one of the most successful politicians in Guyana, but most of all, one of the most pleasant politicians that you can find in Guyana the past 30 years. Our guest this evening is the Caribbean's longest serving Prime Minister, 23 years and a few months, and he is currently Guyana's ambassador to the United States, none other than the Honorable Samuel HINDS, that I will refuse to call Samuel and call Sam, because I've known him so long and there's a kind of informality in the relation. Well, after the protocol, I will explain something about Sam HINDS that I will always remember, because I think this is the kind of open-mindedness humans should have. Sam, thanks for being here again. We're given your portfolio. We're not going to get in all the questions for the hour. Akash, Prime Minister Sam HINDS.
Good to meet you again. Thank you.
Okay, let me say these remarks about Sam HINDS. I was very critical of the government of the day that Sam HINDS was the Prime Minister of. And a fellow from the WPA wanted a house lot. And I remember Sam was, at that time, the man who had signed, because of his capacity, signed his dismissal letter. So I went to the Prime Minister and I said, but I've never called him PM, and I go there as Sam, because in the Burnham years I knew him as Sam. I said, look, this gentleman wants a house lot. He has a problem there right now where he's renting. The landlord is kicking him out. And I was this daily columnist in the Starbuck, in the Kaiju News, criticizing the Prime Minister's government. And he said, yes, I remember that guy. He's so unfortunate. Yes, yes. And right there and then, he made his calls, and that gentleman is living perfectly in his house in Eccles. Then the second time I went to him, he was acting president. I was still the volcanic critic of the PPP. And I said, this guy is being wronged. Larry Lewis is giving this guy a hell of a runaround for his firearm. And I outlined who the businessman is. And Prime Minister Salman said, yes, I will facilitate you, Freddie. And he made the necessary documentation, and that gentleman has his firearm, something like a Jamaican just not firearm. Now, that is Sam Hinds. That is how we should be when we're in government. He didn't forget me during the Burnham years. He didn't forget Freddie Kissoon. And so when Freddie Kissoon came and asked for these favors, he didn't put politics in front. I can't remember if I mentioned that, and I'm glad I mentioned it now because it typifies the nature of the man Sam Hinds. Sam, once again, thanks for being here. I will now leave Akash to speak to you.
It's such a pleasant surprise to be here, actually. But I want to go back to our first encounter. In 2007, I decided I was going to do the hinterland safari from Georgetown to Orinduke. And when I got to understand in the morning, we hooked up with a guy from Linen, Alan Cheetau.
Yeah.
And while going on that trip that morning, we stopped at, actually you stopped at Mabura where there's a lodge.
Yeah.
And you went in for breakfast and you went out back and you came out back and you said, well, you know me, whenever I go to somewhere to eat, my entire family have to eat too, and you're all my family. And everyone was invited inside for breakfast. What was evident at that time was your love for country, not just the political arena, but the beauty that is Guyana. Tell me a little bit about your love for this, because when I saw the panoramas for the first time, I was in awe. I could not believe what I was seeing.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I think it's the way I grew up and my makeup. I grew up in the Canadian mission schools, and for those who are old like me and remember the Canadian mission schools, they were the Presbyterians from Canada. When they came in the 1870s sometime with a mission to turn the children of the Hindus and Muslim indentured laborers from India into Christians. But they went to the Scots schools, which were the Presbyterians from Scotland, to get their first set of teachers, the Sixth Standard, those who had left school in Sixth Standard to go and teach with them. My grandmother was one such from Mahaica, and she spent her life teaching in the Canadian mission school systems. In those systems at that time, 90% of the children would be of Indian descent because that was the focus of the Canadian mission school system. So I lived there and I got to know what people's imaginations were about, and I could sense difference between the Black African imagination and the Indian imagination. And then my mother's mother was half Portuguese and half Black, so some of her half sisters, so my mother's half sister, half brother, were maybe three-quarter Portuguese, as we might say at the time. And then I stayed with them when I came down on a scholarship to go to QC. So I got a feeling for different groups of people in Guyana. We said we are 6 people. You got a feeling for them and their different views of life. And I would say later when I read the Western Trial, I noticed that Chetty mentioned that growing up in Port Morant and seeing all these different peoples, he had a feeling that Guyana was a microcosm of the world. And excuse me a bit.
Yes, sure.
Let me just take this off. I should have got it. Yeah, so Chetty mentions also that Guyana was a microcosm of the world. And so we had this challenge. And I can mention that I think we largely underrated this challenge, didn't understand it. We had 6 peoples with different history, experiences outside of Guyana and within Guyana. And that made for quite a bit of difference in view of the world and ideals and so on. And we have a challenge to come together. And I think that challenge was underrated. I think Chetty was one person who recognized how much that challenge would be and how much we needed to work at making one people of our 6 peoples. And so I think that might have caught, that part of Chetty might have caught my imagination quite early. And as it happened to, I guess I often say that I'm basically a revolutionary, but I'm a conservative revolutionary. And again, the experience of being a country boy, we had about 3 acres of rice land on our place in Huntley. But at that time, it had no drainage and irrigation, which was not uncommon. So you had to do your work in line with the seasons, the rain and the sun. And one year, it got wrong, and most people didn't cut their rice, but we did have to cut it because the alternative was doing nothing all day or going and cut there. And from the 3 acres that year, we only got 12 bags of paddy. But that's what you had to eat. Yes, with
grass knife.
And then take it to the carry-on and drive the bulls around to mash the rice and so on. Yes. Wow. And so that year we only got 12 bags of paddy from 3 acres, but that is what we had to live on to eat, until the next crop, which was one crop they did there a year. And then the other year they got the rainfall right and the sunshine right, and we got 60 bags out of that, 20 bags an acre, which was a better year there. Now these days, that I'm telling you is like 52, 53, 54, 55. Now, I think when we came into government, where maybe they were in 92, the average might have been 30 bags an acre. Now I'm told it's maybe 40 bags an acre, and places getting 45. And the people in the East Asia, they look to like 60 bags an acre is what they would consider the standard that they would be aiming for. But I say that to say many things. You understand, the rural people like myself have a great connection with the work and the effort you do and your income. Mm-hmm. The urban person, maybe usually you think of a guy checking off on the wharf, a stevedore checking off bags coming off a ship, say in the 1920s. That person doesn't have the same relationship, the same ideas with his income or his standard of living and the work that he does. It's not the same. So that urban people and rural people have, with their different experiences, they have different ideas or different inclinations on many important topics. I certainly feel. So I called myself, I was revolutionary, but as a conservative revolutionary, in that I know that you got to get food on the table.
Let me ask you a question to see how you bring out your conservative revolutionary thinking. February was Black History Month.
Yes.
You're one of the most successful African Guyanese politicians. I mean, you served for 23 years as Prime Minister, and for the years that I have known you, you seem to be incapable of rubbing people wrongly. What are your thoughts on African Guyanese as Guyana enters a new phase of a petrodollar economy that seemed to have moved away from the doldrums of the 60s, 70s, and 80s?
Well, I would say that maybe we all wanted to have oil being found. We were looking for oil for 100 years, or we were getting people looking for oil for 100 years, and then in 2015, Exxon and the others found oil offshore. But it might have made the differences in views which still survive much sharper, maybe. For example, going back to my model there, I think the rural people tend to put more emphasis on investments. It's easier for them to see putting the money to put in, say, drainage and irrigation on the rice field, so you get better control. I think that comes a bit stronger and easier to them. The people in the cities generally don't have that experience, and then it doesn't come naturally to them. So what has happened, I think it has accentuated, maybe it has even accentuated the difference between our PNC grouping and our PPP grouping in Guyana. It might have put more tension in there, as we might see reflected in the teacher strike at the moment. I did write a piece there on related to it, in that I was moved by the words of the attributed to the president of the Teachers Union, which basically said, I think he said, you can't be building infrastructure and teachers going hungry. I've seen some things that said our teachers are the lowest paid in the Caribbean, but all our people, every one of our people is lowest paid in the Caribbean. But what struck me was, I think about 2009 or something, we have a South Korea Guyana Joint Commission. The chap came, the team came from South Korea. I was the head of the Guyana team. And as we were traveling around in Georgetown, he noticed the garbage. And he said, we have equipment, combustors, incinerators that can burn garbage and so on. And so on. So I said, yes, that would be good to have those. But it's a total question about people's outlook and ideas of the world and themselves and so on. And he said, yes, it is so. And then he said, I must say, as a child with my parents, grandparents, and also all people in Korea back in the 1960s. We had that Korean War. Things were bad. We were living on alms from the world at large. And we were all shouting to General Park, give us food, don't give us infrastructure. But he said, I have to admit now, since that it is the infrastructure that put us on the path of rapid development of South Korea. Nowadays, we think of South Korea, we think of Samsung, and we think of Hyundai and so on, and one of the most developed countries, particularly with respect to electronics. And so the exact parallel there was that exact parallel with what had happened in South Korea and what is happening now in Guyana. So there's expectations have certainly risen. I think in terms of our situation in Guyana, our two groups of people, we of the PPP, more rural people, we tend to feel stronger about investments and preparations for the future. Maybe people in the city area traditionally feel more that expenditures of the moment and so on. So it has maybe made the tension a little bit more at the moment. So I hope we work through it. I think our president's program of One Guyana, I hope it takes root all through our country, certainly in terms of the investments we are making all around. It should give the basis. It should give some basis to that.
Akash?
Yeah. When I asked you about love of country just now, you mentioned the name Cheddi Jagan maybe 2 times or more. Can you recall your first encounter with the great man?
Okay, I think I met him once or twice before 1990, say, mainly just in passing, en passant. I met him, but then I first consciously met him in 1990. You may recall, leading up to those days from the 85 rigged election, there was the commitment of all the parties to join together. But then when the time was coming, there was a feeling in the other parties that the PPP jargon on the PPP days had passed. But, and I was speaking, but I had taken a position which I thought was realistic, a realistic position that Chedi and the PPP had paid a great price to keeping Guyana as one. You know, they had been made a fool of in the elections and so on and so on. So he and his people had paid a great price. And I said in Guard at the time, look, he's paid such a price, we should offer our support unreservedly with no demands. Just offer full support. He's demonstrated, he and the PPP has demonstrated that they're committed to be Guyanese. So that was the position that I took. Then it didn't find great favor. In fact, I would say I had sensed in the running up that some people were kind of thinking, fair and free elections and whoever wins. But some other people were feeling fair and free elections, but Lord help us, let it not be Chedi and the PPP. So that was appearing in 1990 with the Guard movement and all.
Those were people among your midst. Those were people saying that too were among your midst. You would say.
Well, I would say many did not say it, but if you hear them speak, that is how you'd read them. They may not have said it. When I say, they may not have explicitly said it, but if you hear them speak, that would be what you would gather.
This is interesting. I'm asking you, these were people who didn't want Burnham.
Yes.
But were apprehensive
they wanted
about
the end of the PNC, yes.
But apprehensive about Chedi Jagan in the PPP. Why?
I think it's, again...
Is it the mulatto Creole class thing?
It's all those things. I read your write-ups there, yes, and I think that is certainly a relevant discussion about that period. And I think it's quite true. There's lots of truth in it. And living here, coming and living here and having the experiences, people have to accommodate themselves to the situation they're in. You know, there's a kind of a trend that some people comment on. I think that guy might have commented on it way back in the 1950s, that those Indian families which had come earlier, and some of their members had started to advance education-wise, culturally-wise, moved to Georgetown. I think Ched even mentions it. They had, let us say, they were further down on the road to being anglicized, creolized. I know many don't like the term, being adjusting themselves to the present situation, and yes, many of them felt that Chedi and the PPP were still rural people, maybe still with mud up to their knees, and they really don't know about ruling and the behavior and pattern of governing and so on. At least the rituals more, I think, than the purpose. And that again is another issue that I've seen between our group, the PPP and the PNC, and that again it overlaps rural and urban. Then that.
Can I cut you? They had people in Guard that were thinking like that in 1990.
Yes, I would say it was maybe 50-50 in the Guard and Guard supporters and Guard supporters. Yes.
How you felt as a rural guy?
Well, maybe I understood.
How you felt with no sentiments?
Maybe I've grown more mellow with years, but I think I quite often, from very early, as again I said, I lived in maybe a black group, a black Protestant group. I was in close contact, immersed in rural Indian groups. I was also immersed in Catholic Portuguese urban group. So I knew that each one of them had different sentiments, different thoughts, and kind of being closely related to them. I didn't come from the position that, they must be, crazy people, or they must be violent people or something. I understood that each one of those positions were human positions that they ended up at, that they were at. And I didn't think any worse for anybody of their particular views. And quite often, the views are not racial. That's one of the difficulties we've had in Guyana, in that you have this overlap, and it's quite difficult to distinguish whether it's a race difference, or urban-rural difference, or a religious difference that you're seeing. In Maikoni, there was the story about this guy named Jacob James. And the story was about him. I think we should have something written up about him. The story was that he used to say that once cash money, I think this is maybe his peak days, might have been the 1940s, say, if once cash money come into his hand, it only leave his hand when he going to buy cow and rice field land. That's the only time. You might think that at the time would be an Indian kind of feeling, an idea. And that if he has a court case, and he always had plenty court cases, apparently he leave the day before because he walking down to Georgetown, he ain't buying no train ticket or no bus ticket. That was the kind of story about Jacob James. And interestingly, again, there's also a story that some Congolese or something, the British had stopped trading in shipping slaves, and then if they caught any ships, other ships with slaves, they would free the slaves. And there was a story that they brought some slaves so caught and freed and put them up the Maikoni Creek. And so it could be that he and his immediate family didn't have the slave experience. They had a different experience. And so the experience of groups where they live and so on, and the historical experiences tends to put them to think some certain ways. So maybe I recognize that. So maybe I never had the strong feelings of against different.
No, but you would not, because those people that you're talking about would have been urban elites, educated in the West. Some of them went to private schools.
Yes, lots of them. Different races, urban elites, yes.
I am so glad you have brought that out, because that sociological viewpoint is coming from someone who is not actively engaged in politics and is not a PPP Indian.
Yeah.
So you could say, hey man, he's Indian, he's in the PPP. But I think, Sam, that I thank you very much for that kind of analysis, because I think researchers are going to use it. Here is Sam Hines saying, when we form a civil society group called GUARD to free Guyana from Burnham authoritarianism, there was a specific instinct in that movement that felt the Indian PPP should not have assumed power.
Yes, I would say it's 50-50. I called for...
the 50-50 thing is shocking. You thought we'd been, at least there would have been a minority at 10%, 50-50.
I would say it's probably about even. And I did call for a retreat for us to sit and talk it through. And we did have at that Catholic place on the East Coast there.
Yes, St. Paul's.
Yeah. So we did have a place there. We did have a come together Saturday afternoon to talk about it. It wasn't addressed directly. I think maybe I should say more people were thinking that Chedi and the PPP's days had passed. And let us admit it and put it on the table too. Many Afro people felt we had worked here. Afro people had been here before. They did all the hard work, and they were more ready. They had been in the public service. They were more ready to manage government.
I'm asking you now, are there remnants that are strategically placed in Guyana today?
I think that feeling is much less now than it was in the 1950s.
But
let me say some things too. My grandfather in the 1950s, my grandfather is telling me, he was born in 1889, and he's telling me as a young man in 1910, say, they're about 20 years old, a ship came in with Indian immigrants, and they look pretty awful after 3 months trip or whatever it is. They look pretty awful. And then it was discovered that they were really going for Suriname, but they had come into the wrong place. And so they had to go back on the boat and come in. So I would say in the 1950s, nearly every family, Afro family, had someone who had seen people come in, immigrants from India come into Guyana. And at the same time, in the Indian families, nearly everyone still had members who had come from India. So there was a strong feeling amongst the blacks that Indians are still immigrants, they're not yet Guyanese. So I think it's almost natural if you were in those groups that there would be those feelings. And again, Chedi, people would say he always managed, contrived to get a group at the head of the PPP that had persons from each of the groups in Guyana. In fact, interestingly, when the four people who formed PAC, and then and then the formation of the PPP in 1950, and it was intended that Chase would have been chairman, but Burnham had come back with he was well spoken of about being this young, brilliant lawyer coming back from the UK. And interestingly, about 2000 or so, I happened to be there and with Janet and Comrade Janet and Comrade Ashton Chase. And Comrade Janet says, I've wondered from time to time how our politics would have turned out if we didn't insist on you or press you into giving up the chairmanship for Forbes in the party.
So she told us, and she's
yes, she was reminiscing. I was there myself, her and Ashton. So I said, I think we had a challenge that we did not perceive how difficult is it and how deep it is, It's almost like peeling a layer. So I know Indian guys say, we're friends. And maybe that's the first layer of an onion. Then something else comes along. Maybe we're competing for a job. Mm-hmm. And then maybe the next time we're competing for the same woman. And then, so like peeling, each time we get a challenge, we have to reconsider our position. Is it happening because I'm black and he's Indian? And after many layers, eventually it doesn't matter. But it takes time and it keeps going through, and maybe the majority of people have to go through these incidents where something happens and one interpretation, it's a racial issue, and then maybe some of the time you end up thinking so, but a lot of the time you start to think that it is just people and not just not a racial issue.
In 2016, I ventured all the way to the back of North Maibikuri, I think that is. There's a place called Zambia.
Yes.
So I asked the guy, I said, Zambia, is this the name of the place?
Yeah, Black Bush Boulder.
Yes, all the way to the back. And he said to me that, look, there were some issues, and it was then Chedi Jagan who had suggested that we move to this location, and he gave us two acres of homestead and 20 acres of rice land.
Well, that was happened. It was the opening of the Black Bush Polder in Rice, and I think Chedi insisted that there should be a certain number of black families going in, and I guess for comfort in those days, maybe you still felt comfortable amongst your own, let us say.
Right.
And there's this one village, I think there may be 4 villages, kind of 4 groups in that Black Bush Polder, and there's one called Zambia, yes. And at least at the beginning, it was largely more Afro-Guyanese, yeah.
And those men spoke very greatly of Chedi Jagan and his vision.
Yes.
1992, October 1992, when the government, when PPP went into government, fundamentally much had to have been changed, but there was a vision for this entire country. And would you like to share some of those?
Well, I think looking back a bit more, I think it happened, growing up in an Afro group, I would say that maybe until I would have thought of them, I would have accepted the sentiments that would have been prevalent in an Afro group in Guyana at the time. But I think one of the first times I sensed a challenge to it would have been in the 1962 budget and that first demonstrations and protests and riots and burnings that we had in 1962. And at that time, Chetty had, as I heard him say on a number of occasions, he had put together some taxes on the people who were better off to form a development fund. But the people who were better off were able to agitate those people who had nothing in the city, the blacks in the city. They were able to agitate them in those circumstances of 1952, and we got what we had in 1962. And I recall a number of the blacks saying, Chetty wants us to do what our children and grandchildren should be doing. But maybe being an 18-year-old, I think at the time, nearly 19, 18 plus in 62, and doing A-levels, I was feeling, we want development. We want development. You need money. You need money. My rural experience would tell me you need some money to invest and get some developments. And therefore, I think that's when my first questioning of maybe the prevailing sentiments in African groups. And let me say again, it's not racial, it depends, because I know people Indian guys who lived, at least two families, who lived in Linden through the terrible 64 thing. Mm-hmm. And I found them back living in Linden in the 70s. And later I learned from them, they grew up in Linden. They suffered the bad experience in 64. And when they came and lived amongst the Indian groups on the coast, they said, we can't get out with them people. We go back to Linden. And so it's not race, but it's the group common experiences end up with certain attitudes. And on my case, sometimes I hear people in the early days, at least people tell me, you're living like a coolie man, and I live like a black man.
That's when you were Prime Minister?
Maybe a bit earlier than that.
But you were by then associated with the anti-dictatorship struggle against Burnham? Coming close to that.
Yes. Yes, I would say, interestingly, if you mention about it, I did have 2 one-on-ones with Forbes over in the time. I had an old friend named Frank Denbo, kind of family related.
That's the medical man?
No, he was brother to Claude, who was our dentist, and the husband of Enid, who was one of our doctors. So and he was a right-hand man of Forbes in the public service board, what they call it, public service commission or something, and so on. So I was close there. But in 1962, that seemed later the same year after that strike against the budget, Chetty had gotten some scholarships from the Soviet Union, including our friend Raymond Gaskin, Steve Bobbill, and some other names.
Steve Sewage Bali.
Maybe not Steve went to East Germany. But anyways, there's some...
Yeah, he went to East Germany.
Yes, so some of... he had gotten scholarship, and then Forbes went to the U.S. Chetty had gone, and Forbes had gone later. Anyway, Forbes was offered some scholarships from the U.S., and Frank was telling me about it, Frank Denbo, but he didn't recommend me, and I wondered why. But anyhow, another teacher, Bob Barker, recommended me. So I went to see Forbes, and in the morning I got there, I see him, and he said, "How is Chetty's boy this morning?" This is in maybe July 1962. And I said, "Well, I didn't tell you I was Chetty's boy, but maybe that's what you've been told." But again, I think it reflects, in the society. I wasn't saying saying the
but
thing.
You weren't a pro-PNC, pro-black guy. Burnham called you Chetty's boy.
I wasn't saying the views that were prevalent at the time, particularly in the early 1962. The fire and the burning, people have to justify it, and they say some things to justify it. Why they were inclined and participated in such things. But I wasn't saying those things. So the other people in the group would say, would sense that he is not one of us. Mm-hmm. So I guess Forbes would have heard from some of the other young people and people that Heinz is not one of us. He's not saying, that Chetty wants us to do things that our children and grandchildren should be left to do. I wasn't saying those kind of views. And so you got the word there. This was in 1962. So 30 years later, it turned out I happened to be Chetty's boy as his number, as running mate.
His Prime Minister, look at that Bonham. What Bonham said in his grave.
Yes.
But
let's not talk about the future.
sure,
The
I
future.
wanted to go there. It looks from all the statistics, the analyses, it looks like we've left the past behind. It looks like we have.
I'm not sure. I'm
talking
concerned.
about an economic future. I'm talking about elevation
concerned.
of.
I'm concerned that we have not talked things through, and therefore, us PPP and PNC, we have not cleaned the slate to have different relations. We had that situation with South Africa, and I think up to a certain time, maybe 1990, most people would have said, if you asked them, South Africa is going to end one day with big bloodshed, right? Most people would have said that, and then it didn't. But then there was that thing of reconciliation. You happen to have good people there, 222 in addition to Mandela, and you had people on the white side too who were facilitated it and who believed in it, and so you went through a period, and now that is behind. Apartheid is not a big thing in front. I think in our case, our history is still there because we have not cleaned it. We have not cleared it from the table. So it's still before us, and it in our current situation, I think it tends to maybe even intensify the difference in the views. It tends to intensify.
Could you expand on that? What would you propose, or how would you shape the future to,
Well, I would like the past to be, what I would like, and I had been, from my days in university, 63, 67, got in contact with a management guy named Peter Drucker that writes on management, and he would say always, performance is human. It's a human thing. And he also says that you should make the best management decision with all the management tools you can put together, make the best management decision. But you must also be aware that having made that management decision, you've also made a moral, religious decision, and you've made also a social, political decision. So all these things are there together. I think we need to get a sense of the slate being clean. Maybe the blacks, Afro blacks would say, man, turn into the Indian group. We did a lot of things that maybe weren't right in those days, and maybe you could understand our feelings there at the time. We felt, we had experienced a lot of discrimination, color from the white people, and we served, and we had a feeling it was our time had come to get into office and so on. But you understand that, and maybe the Indian would say, yeah, man, we understand, and let's take a drink on it and go forward. And that kind of experience and those sentiments, I think you need that. It's not something very rational. The
oil economy with its vastness
may only intensify the feelings.
You think so? It wouldn't help to satisfy some unstable emotions? Because remember, the pie is bigger now.
I think yes, but things are people are the whole range of things, rational and irrational, emotional and logical, they're all there together at the same time. So it can. I would certainly hope that it will make it less. But I would say from my experience and reading and so on, I would say that sometimes, somehow, the slate has to be clean. There has to be admission, recognition on the other one hand, and saying the other side saying, man, we understand that time, and let's move forward and not stay hung up on it, so that we can all be very happy on achievements, so that a great achievement is not a great achievement of Indian Guyanese or Black Guyanese, it's an achievement of a Guyanese.
So you're saying with our oil economy and so much to be shared,
it might even intensify issues that have not been cleared, emotionally cleared.
But how could it intensify when the economy allows for inclusion?
Because people are not only
rational. They're
not only rational, and they're not only food. There's a thing, Maslow. You would know about Maslow, that says when basic requirements of food and clothing and housing are met, people want other higher levels of participation and so on and so on. For example, when we had that loss of people in supporting us in the 2011 elections, I think.
Yeah, 2011.
In particularly in Region 6 and along Kanji. And when I went up to Kanji, it wasn't poor people living, Guyanese poor people living there. Most of the people, yes, were Indo-Guyanese. They had nice cottages. They even had flowers. Many had flowers growing in the gardens and all of that. So it wasn't...
The ambiance was petit bourgeois.
Well,
anyway,
the ambiance. So the issue was, it was not... they didn't move because of, they didn't have anything. They didn't move.
The expectations were greater.
The expectations move on to different levels and different things. But I think the issue of self-worth is important. And the issue of identifying. Say, like, I think I was hopeful, and might still be, say that at one time when people were making the issue that maybe in the 2000s or 2010, that only BK getting all the work, PPP giving all the work to BK. But I was making the point too that BK company, by then we should think of it and feel it as a Guyanese company. And it had guys like, Basilio was pretty important in it, and other non-Indian guys were pretty important in the company. And one way forward is for us, for companies to become Guyanese companies. Certainly companies start as a family company most times, but over time one hopes that it will become, and I think we do have laws about equal employment and so on and so on. And that is to try to get things going toward companies, whoever started it, that it becomes a Guyanese company. And I see some of that. I see quite a bit of that happening. And so I look to those trends. And when I talk about clearing the slate, it's not going to be necessarily a very formal thing. I think it's more things that people feel somehow. You feel, yes. So.
But, sorry, Akash, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Look, I'm listening to all this, and it brings me to my next question. You mentioned about you cutting rice by hand and mashing with the bull, which may seem very primitive, but you did it, 12 bags one year.
Indo-Guyanese did it a lot, and the blacks who were in
and then you go back and you do it again, and then you get 20 bags.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of Guyanese people, especially the young people, who wants to wake up tomorrow morning in the soil economy and have money in their account and the bourgeois life and all of that. What is your advice to those people? What is your advice to general, not those people, general Guyanese, the general Guyanese populace?
Well, I tell people,
moving forward.
People have asked me, in fact, sometimes asked me to speak to young people here in Guyana, and the issue is to be empowered. And particularly in the time when the PPP is in office, for black groups, empowering means throwing those people out of office and being in office. But I tend to stress that when you think of wanting to be empowered, you basically want to be capable. I think you want to be one of the good surgeons or medical doctor or engineers or even mechanic for cars, whatever people need work, need service, need things done.
That's right.
You want to be good at it. And to become good at it, you got to study it, you got to work at it, you got to apply yourself readily and regularly at it. It means you must be an honest person, a conscientious person, all those things if you want to be empowered. Empowering sometimes mean some people take it just to be sitting in the office, go and sit in the president's chair, and I get into the president's chair and I could say, like the old rhymes, the Royal Duke of York, he had 10,000 men. He marched them up the top of the hill, marched them down again. When they were up, and so on. Many people feel that is empowerment, but it's not that. It's having ability, capability, having developed yourself, having a view of the world that can anticipate and make preparations for and discipline. Those are the things. And maybe because I didn't grow up with many material things, I guess I don't put all that much worth and value in material things.
You sit physically in a position where a majority of Guyanese do not. You're right in the heart of Washington, and the America and what's coming up in the November election interests the whole world, because there is, I think the average person in the world has a kind of danger instinct about Mr. Trump. I can tell you, I have read history so intensely, it's flowing out of my head. And I think Mr. Trump just seemed to be a different human politically. From your vantage position in Washington, can you tell Guyanese about what is likely to happen in November? Is Mr. Trump likely to be the president of such a formidable superpower in the world?
Let me say that, first of all, in the present world, they tell me distance doesn't matter. You know, all that we have, WhatsApp calls on video calls and everything. And to some
Social
extent,
media, yeah.
so that some extent, I think that is 95% true. So people out around the world can know just as much about these things as people who are sitting there in Washington. But yes, it's a matter of some concern, but you must take it as a starting fact that a lot of people are supporting Trump. Of course, some people say it's a group that is more largely white males, but there's some blacks in it, there are females, and they may say it's largely groups that may not have had a first degree, may not have finished first degree yet, so now you can do those categorizations. But even so, he has significant group there. You know that Miss Haley, Nikki Haley, is staying in the race up to now because some things may happen between now and then, between now and the time. And she's making the case that you don't want two octogenarians running again to be president. I think we just have to wait and see it. But if I am to speculate a bit on it, I think that a lot of the things that we say are good.
You think he's likely to win?
Yeah. A lot of things you say we are good. You know that you must be in office without fear or favor, affection or ill will. And that if I got to chop off hands with something and my mother did the same thing, or my sister, or my wife, I should chop off her hand too. We have the contradictions between these aspirations for good living for society as a whole, and we have our human feelings. And I think what I'm seeing here myself is the clash between those. And there's no doubt that there is also, one may see it as a bit of a reaction to the Obama days, maybe some whites. Well, Obama had support of lots of whites, maybe if I had to guess, 80% of the people who voted for him would have been white people. But the other sets of people might have felt more intently that, look, this country is slipping out of our hands, and so on. So they may have been, their emotions.
And that kind of thinking can lead to a Trump victory in November?
Well, it could have led to a Trump victory in 2022, I guess. It led to his victory over I think, Clinton, Hillary in 2016. So, yes, they say it's quite close. Interestingly, they said that, many of that I've seen, said that Trump and Biden is very close, but if it was Haley versus Biden, Haley would be much more ahead of Biden. That's quite a lot.
So
of
Biden is losing out in both situations. If it's Haley, she's above Trump.
She will
above Biden.
Much strongly. Yeah.
And if it's Biden, Trump is close. So what is Biden? Biden is a loser.
Well, he had said we'll have to wait and see how it goes out. That's why I say I think it's hard to predict at this moment, because I think it's Trump is, I won't say appealing, responding to people's emotional feelings that aren't being considered or addressed, and
I agree that we could sit outside the U.S. and analyze it. But of course, you speak to ambassadors, you speak to State Department officials. If Biden should call a judge,
yes,
what's likely to be?
I think right now it's wide open, and I think some people have speculated about that. Does the Democrat have a second or a third person? In fact, I saw some discussions all the way from. The other thing that happens is Biden and Harris, and some people have been saying you're voting for Harris when you vote for Biden. Some of the Trump people are saying when you vote for Biden, you really vote for Harris. He ain't gonna make it through. He might make it through the first year.
Right. So they're telling people the actual right. You're voting for Biden then.
You vote for Harris.
Right. So that is picking up in the Republican
Party.
Party.
Has implications. You're voting for a woman. You're voting for any woman that is half Indian and quarter black and whatever.
If she's half black, because the father's Jamaican, the mother is Indian.
But he's
a little bit of mulatto.
He's a mulatto guy. Yes.
He's a mulatto.
I happened to sit with him a few times at tables. Her father.
Her father.
Yes.
If you don't have a Biden and a Harris ticket, and you have some dark horse that is acceptable, could the Democrats pull it off?
I don't think they can now, because I don't think they can establish
You're driving
someone.
pessimism in people there.
I don't think they can send someone, but you never know. Things happen. I guess people never expected HINDS to make it
as Prime Minister.
So you never know. I must say, you never know what will happen. So, but at least Haley's staying in because her face is known, she's known, and if anything is to happen, she could be there. So that's why she's deciding to stay in.
Two things are likely to happen. Biden is likely to.
And I think at some time Biden said, as I think I said, if that other guy wasn't running, maybe I wouldn't be running. That other guy being Trump, presumably.
So Biden, it becomes personal. If he running, I am running. That's what Biden.
Well, I don't think it's personal at personality's level, but I think Biden is saying, look, his view of America and my view of America are quite different. At this moment, I don't see any other Democrat that might win him easily. So I'm staying in the race once he's in the race.
But he is, people are making fun of Biden. The Italians had a thing of him going like this. And then they have him looking around, and he go that way, and then he go the wrong way. The Italians had a caricature of him that was quite interesting.
Yes, and that is an issue, and he's aware of it. And some of the things people say, a president doesn't have to be, running with a gun or a thing. He's called upon to act wisely. It's his wisdom and his experience that counts. He doesn't have to be the man who's running with a Brent gun or a Sten gun on the
You asked us to look to the future. So I'll ask the last question for Akash on the future, and then we will conclude with your notes on the future.
Yeah.
One of the most beautiful sights I've ever had is sitting in Karasibai, looking out under those mango trees and the beautiful Pacoraimas. I know you love that part of this country so much. Is that after your long and distinguished career would have been over? Are those one of the places you would like to be in your?
Actually, I've been
sunset?
thinking about it. I think my wife is dead set on getting back there on the East Bank of Farm, but I'm thinking, out in the Peruni area, somewhere. Actually, last Christmas, my daughter was thinking of getting a book for me, and getting something for me. I chose a book there that talks about that Poconos area in New York. And it 100 years ago, it was dirt roads and so on, and things, barges across the rivers and so on. No, the bridges were not yet in and so on. So
you see retirement coming?
It depends on what you mean by retirement.
I
hope to work until the day I die. Drop.
Oh, so you're not going to call it.
It may not be paid work. It may not be paid work.
I'm a public service. You're a prime minister. You're a master.
It may be, yes. I hope to do something.
Public service.
I hope I can be doing something until the day I drop.
Well, I must say, for you in your early 80s, you look down.
I was 80 last December, so it's very early 80s.
I wish we had a program. I wish you in Guyana we were celebrating the birthday. I'm looking at you all the time.
Yes.
You don't think that shirt that could look? Could look good. Where you got the shirt jacket?
I used to wear shirt and ties too.
So this was bought in the U.S. or
No, this is one of my old shirt jackets. I got put up on.
So you got a couple well in the wardrobe?
Yes, sir. I have a few well in the wardrobe.
Listen, please, when you likely to come back?
I'm not so sure.
Oh, but I forget to ask you, planning to write anything? Your memoir.
Well, I did write something on getting into politics. The PPPC, Chadi's innovation, social, political innovation. 11 pages. I sent you two.
I'm talking about
and my bridge into politics.
I'm talking about a memoir.
We may get to that. Yes.
You may get to that?
Yeah, we get to that.
I'm looking forward to read that.
Okay.
Free copy for me, of course.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, sir. Good. Thank you. Thank you, public.
You were watching the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show. Our guest this evening was none other than the Honorable Sam HINDS, longest serving Prime Minister in the Caribbean and currently Guyana's ambassador to the United States. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time, as I normally say. Catch you later. Bye-bye.